Welcome, everyone, to the Rise from the Shadows season finale. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer. And before we get started, I just want to say personally thank you to all of our listeners out there who support both the Shadows podcast and Rise from the Shadows. We would not be able to continue doing this and putting out all this great content if it wasn't for our great listeners out there. But don't worry, we're going to be returning for season 2 of Rise from the Shadows next year. And we're already starting to put together a good lineup of guests. So if you or someone you know would like to be one of our speakers next season, all you got to do is head over to theshadowspodcast.com and contact us. And until then, continue to check out all the amazing Shadows podcast episodes each and every Thursday. Now, what a journey this has been, season 1. Before we begin with our finale, let's recap some of the amazing things that you've heard over the past 6 hours of content that we've delivered. You've learned to embrace you for who you are. Embrace your outsider. Also, we've learned to understand that just because we experience suffering doesn't mean that we have to stay in it. Sometimes we have to look under our own hood and work on our own emotional intelligence and our own mental state to enhance the communication with those around us. We all need a strong support system at times and to help us heal our wounds. Hurt people. But remember, empowered people empower people. Rise from the Shadows has taught us that our intentional decisions and actions define who we are. We've helped you identify your personal core values and the importance of developing and identifying an ethical framework. And we need to find that courage and get comfortable being uncomfortable. Step out of your comfort zone. Do things you're not comfortable doing. Embrace being vulnerable by putting ourselves out there. It's given us a sense of hope that has allowed us to face and conquer the monsters that we've already faced and that we're eventually going to have to slay in life and be able to overcome our shadows. Folks, welcome to season 1 finale. We're going to go ahead and get things started with Jason Womack. Jason Womack is a leadership development instructor at Air University at Maxwell Air Force Base, Montgomery, Alabama. And today he's going to get your wheels turning right off the bat with a powerful message about leading humans being. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Womack.
What if there was a single question that you could ask the leader in the mirror? A single question that, if you asked, would change the energy you brought to an upcoming conversation. It might even change what you enter the next room with when you walk in and see the people out in front of you. What if there was one question you could ask that could change your or someone else's life? Hey friends, my name is Jason Womack. I go by JW. I am an instructor down here in Montgomery, Alabama. I'm an author, I'm a speaker, I'm a husband, I'm a triathlete, I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a friend. I am a human being his best right now. You know, recently I was sharing in front of a group some of the thoughts that I'll let you ruminate on today, and it slipped out of my mouth. I said, right now, a lot of us are in the situation of leading humans being. And I stopped for a moment because, probably should have said we're leading human beings. But then I realized, and later on when I did my daily reflection, and if you don't have some kind of a daily journaling exercise, reach out to me. I made a short little video over on YouTube about why it is so important that emerging and positional leaders pause at the end of every day, put pen to paper. And I'm serious, put pen to paper, because in that moment of reflection, of slowing ourselves down, right? We think, heck, we can watch a movie at 32 pictures a second. Most of us will talk at about 150, 120 words per minute. Typing, I can type at about 60 words a minute until I hit the numbers, and then I have to slow way down. But when I write, I know for me that I'm writing only at about maybe 30 words per minute if I want to be able to read it later on. Oh, and if I really want to slow down, I'll put my pen in my non-dominant hand and really have to focus on the words falling on the page. I was going through my journaling exercise and I wrote that down. I said, right now we are leading humans being. And realizing, and I'll date stamp this, realizing that 22 months into this thing we call pandemic, with who knows what's going to happen over the upcoming winter with variants and other mandates that are going to come and go and change, and then maybe even come back again. What I like all of us to do is to pause. And I want to share with you a philosophy I have. It's a 3-part philosophy, and it all is going to drive to where I started earlier in this sharing with you, which is, what if there's one question that we could ask ourselves and others, but what if there was a question that we could ask right before we step into a position of influence, right before we step into an opportunity to discipline, right before we step into the next time that we're going to be around other people? I mean, look, the facts of the matter are clear to me. Life would be easier if there weren't anybody around. I mean, no, maybe it wouldn't be better, but if there weren't anybody around to get in my way, if there weren't anybody around to let me down, if there weren't anybody around to hurt me, if there weren't anybody, I hope you are seeing the flaw in my logic, folks. We are social creatures. We are humans being. So I want you to reflect. I want you to take time for your own self. If you're driving right now, can you give me 7 minutes? Right? If you're listening to this while you're watching something, can you click pause on what you're watching? Maybe even close your eyes. Get rid of the visual cues of distraction. Do you know how distracted we get? Folks, here's the truth. You don't have a time management problem. You don't have a productivity problem. You have a see it, think I have to do it issue. I mean, look, right now I'm sitting here at my desk, and up in front of me I got two 32-inch monitors connected to my 16-inch MacBook. Now, unless I shut all of that down, which I have to do so that I can be with you, unless I shut all that down, I'm going to have a social media feed over there. I'm going to have a email inbox over there. I'm going to have any kind of a messaging app that can get me at any moment in time. And goodness forbid that I have my Zoom open, which generally I leave my Zoom room open so that at any point in time, if I'm in my office and someone wants to drop by, why should they have to drive to the state of Alabama? Why should they have to fly to the country of America? Wouldn't it be great if they could join a meeting, type in my cell phone number, and we could instantly meet? By the way, if you have my cell phone number, you now have my Zoom meeting ID. Now, this question, it's going to come at the end of the 1, 2, 3 that I want to hit you with. Now, the first thing that I want to share with you is there are 3 things that my mind is doing all day long. In fact, while you're listening to this right now, your mind is doing these 3 things. Now, of course, they don't come in any particular order. I mean, they come in the order they come as I'm going through the day. But because you're listening to this and I'm talking using words that fall out of my mouth, one word at a time, one sentence at a time, one paragraph at a time, I've got to put them in some order. So let me share with you the 3 things that our brains are doing all day long. And by the way, some psychologists have postulated that we do not stop doing this while we're sleeping, but that's for a different podcast, for a different expert. One thing that my brain is doing is it is attempting to pay attention to what could be important. The second thing my brain is doing, it is attempting to ignore what it thinks is not important. And the third thing that my brain is doing is solving the problems I gave it to think about. Now, if you're a note taker like me, and if you're a visual thinker like me, maybe you drew a triangle the moment I said that there were 3 things the brain does. Or for you list makers, you bullet makers, maybe what you did is you made 3 bullets. You saved 3 lines. You divided your page into 3 parts because you know what's coming now, right? I'm going to talk for a moment about each one of these to try to bring this home, to try and give you the significance of what our brain is doing all day long. Number 1, it is attempting to focus on what it thinks is important. Now, there's a lot to that sentence. Because I can ask right now, I've only been talking for about 7 minutes and 40 seconds. My question to you is, what have you noticed that you think is important? Maybe you're like me, and when you listen to podcasts that you think you might get something out of, you've been taking notes during this thing. But then my question is, while you were listening, did a competing thought overtake you listening to my voice? Just nod your head up and down. I know it did. I mean, gosh, if I'm sitting anywhere for 8 minutes, I promise you I am not solely focused on that one thing out in front of me. You give me a book, a couch, and 8 minutes, and you say go read, I promise you, even though my average reading speed is a page a minute, I read at about 300 words per minute, even though my average reading speed is a page a minute, for me to read 8 minutes straight, to get through 8 pages without stopping and having some thought, and goodness forbid if I'm reading on my Kindle and I find a word I didn't know, a phrase I didn't know, a topic or theme I didn't know, and I'm on my Kindle, yeah, I'm going to highlight that and jump over to Wiktionary. Next thing I know, I'm in Wikipedia. Next thing I know, I'm reading about Rome, which is the second thing. Your brain is fighting to ignore what it thinks is not important. Now, I could stop right there and I could send you on a goose chase and I could say, hey, over the past 24 hours, look at your clocks right now. What have you noticed that you could have ignored? And what did you ignore that you probably should have focused on? Now, that third part, our brain is solving the problems we give it. Now, I don't think about problem as a bad thing. I don't think problem is a negative thing. I think about problem as maybe Richard Feynman would have, or Sojourner Truth would have, or maybe Malala would have thought about a problem. And the way that I look at a problem is it's pretty simple. A problem is a current situation based on past that should not continue into the future. A current situation based on past that should not continue on into the future. Now, by that definition, my guess is you could probably write down a few problems you're facing. A current situation based on past experiences, past opportunities, past limfacs, past whatevers that you look out to the future and you think, I do not want that to be the future. I don't want that to be the legacy. Hold on to that. I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, well, how do I identify problems and how do I work on solutions? So I told you we would go 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end this sharing by giving you the question that I alluded to at the beginning of this recording. But right now, I want to talk about what I call the 2 whys. Here's a great problem that I would give yourself. A great problem. The problem I would give yourself is, what are your whys? Ooh, I probably just came in from another angle, maybe even came off the top rope, because you've heard people ask you, what is your why? But folks, that's singular and it's incomplete. As far as my research has shown, we have a min of 2 whys. We have the because why, which gets us from the past to the present. And we have the so that why, which takes us from the present into the future that we can't see yet. So why, and you can fill in the blank with a current situation. And that current situation is going to have 2 answers. It's going to have the because of, because of whatever that situation was, we now need to do whatever it is that we're doing. Wonderful. Why are we doing whatever we are doing? So that. Now, if you can do a dotted line connection in your notes right there, you probably figured out very quickly that I believe that the third thing the brain does solving problems that we give it, gets after the so that of why we do what we do. Right? I moved from Santa Barbara, California to Montgomery, Alabama because the United States Air Force offered me a job to teach at Air University.
Here's your reminder.
Yeah, that's right. I moved from Santa Barbara, California, the sunny, mountainous region of Central Coast overlooking the Pacific Ocean, to Montgomery, Alabama, the birthplace of the civil rights movement, the Deep South, so that I could teach at Air University. Now, I moved here because I was offered a position. I moved here so that I could take my understanding of how the world works, of how people operate, of how people think about setting up and stepping into the future, and how they could do that a little bit differently. And that way of going about leading yourself first and others second, just a little bit differently, will come to fruition when you sit down, you look in the mirror, and you ask yourself this question. Because of me, what do I hope they say? Because of me, what do I hope they say? Now, you're going to use this question on any effort that you're about to step into. When I sat down to record this for you today, I asked myself, because of me, what do I hope they say? And now I'm going to answer that in two parts. I'm going to answer it with a bunch of words, that word because, a bunch of words, and those words so that. Well, I hope they say that this was an easy to listen to podcast because I attempt to make these examples so rich and meaningful and directed so that they might go out into the world and wonder what they're going to focus on, what they can ignore for now, and what problem they're going to solve. Now, I could do this all day long. I do this all day long. My challenge to you, to every single one of us, right before you're going to walk into that next thing, I want you to go find a reflective surface. I want you to pause. I want you to look at you and smile and ask, because of me, what do I hope they say?
The Lima Charlie Network is a group of thought leaders and podcasters with the goals of improving ourselves,
inspiring and educating others, and bringing valuable conversations to both military and civilian audiences.
Our vision is to empower others to reach new heights in leadership,
self-development, and communication by connecting our audience to crucial conversations.
Focused on sharing tools, ideas, and perspectives for impactful improvement.
A one-stop shop for aspiring and seasoned leaders alike to gain from the experiences and knowledge of others.
We aren't just a network of colleagues, we are family.
And we invite you to come and join us on this journey.
And we look forward to delivering invaluable information to you loud and clear.
All right, welcome back, folks, to Rise from the Shadows. I'm here with Jason Womack. This is a guest that, along with Caleb Pearson, who was, still is host of the Ignite podcast. Whenever we were talking, I was helping him get some guests set up. Jason was somebody that we were constantly talking about getting on both of our shows, and I couldn't think of a better time. I kind of kept that in my back pocket for the finale of Rise from the Shadows, and here we are, and wow, what a message. That was awesome. Just I can tell you're a pro at this virtual thing, right, at recording this. But sir, welcome to Rise from the Shadows.
You guys, what a pleasure, what an honor. And look at every single one of us. If you have a reflective surface nearby, please glance at that while you're listening to our conversation, because that's who I'm talking to. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking for. I always remind my leaders, when you walk by a reflective surface, check you out, because that's who they're looking at. That's who they see. And they say that, I don't know what the percentage is, but a portion of our communication to one another is that visual back and forth. And so I've got to pause and I got to check me out. And that's what I hope people walked away with from those messages. And, it's fun. You said I had 10 to 15 minutes. I think I took 14 minutes and 58 seconds. So that's what you get.
It's about as accurate as you can get. It was about as accurate as you can get. Yeah. No, the crazy thing is, you were talking about the self-reflection piece. You started with it. You were talking about find something with that reflection. And when I'm sitting here listening to it the first time, I've got some picture frames in front of me on my wall with some posters in them. And I looked up and was looking in there and was doing it as you said that. So definitely good practice for myself. But one of the things you talked about in there, kind of sticking with the self-reflection piece, why do you think it is so easy for us to, we're quick to call out other people on things time after time, but we're afraid to look under our own hood and figure out what we have that we need to fix? Why do you think that's so tough for us to do?
It hurts, man. It hurts. We all hurt. I figure I am one uncomfortable eye contact away. I'm one uncomfortable question away from someone actually caring about the question I get asked multiple times per day, which is, how are you?
Yeah.
Every one of us is in an opportunity. We're walking down the hallway. We're approaching the gate at the front gate. We're in line at a fast food joint, right? And you look up and you ask someone, how are you? I challenge every one of you. Do you really want to know?
Yeah, because what happens when they start
telling you?
If
I really want to know, I might ask it differently. Same words. Yeah. But there is a whole new foundation upon which I'll stand. All right. I'll invite all of you. If you can right now, stand up. And if you can lean back on your heels a little bit, right? Everyone talks about front foot leadership and leading from the front. And I ask you, I said, get your foundation. And if I looked at that human being who's given it all she's got today, she is holding it together, man. I mean, here we are at the midpoint. I'm going to date stamp this thing, right? Are we at the midpoint of the pandemic? Or are we at the tail end of the pandemic? I don't know. You don't know. But if I look out and I see that people are barely holding it together, brother, how willing am I to admit that I'm barely holding it together? And so that concept of why are we so quick to judge, I think it's because we're living in judgment of ourselves. Who's ever said to themselves, if they only knew? Right? You can call it what you want. You can call it imposter syndrome. You could call it self-doubt. You can call it self-empathy. What if it's just being a human means I walk in and I'm basically looking for one, maybe two things. Number one, will I fit in here? Mm-hmm. And number two, do I even belong? Because by the way, I can fit in and still not belong. Right? I've got a CAC that lets me onto base. But if I'm the only, right? Now I've got this weird thing where I'm a white male, but brother, many of the rooms that I walk into, I'm the only civilian who's never worn a uniform. And by the way, in the past 3 years, I've been called out on it.
Really?
And so don't think, please, those of you listening to this, don't think that every single one of us is not walking into a room. I don't care how many stars or stripes you've got. If we're not willing to say, I'm a little bit scared about being me, then I don't know if we're really being fully human.
I like that. And another thing you talked about too was journaling. And there's all sorts of different ways to do it. There's bullet journaling. There's, like you were mentioning, right? Three dots. I think that's the one I was doing. I recently spoke to former guest on the show, Steve Gamlin, and he was telling me to write down. He writes down 3 things each day that he was thankful for, and he can go back and he can see those 1 or 2 words, and it just sparks some sort of emotion in him. For someone who's kind of tiptoeing into journaling, they are trying to find a way to put their words on paper, but they're just not quite sure. What are some tips you would have for them?
Don't focus on the product. Focus on the product of the product. All right. The product is that thing we pay for. All right. So when I pay attention, right, what do I get in return? When I pay it forward, what do I get in return? When I pay, I'm supposed to get something. Right now, people are focused. When I say journaling, they automatically think pen, paper, notebook. Someone might find it and make fun of me. Sorry, I added those last 2 things. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that are of our age or older, and they said, yeah, I tried that one time. Someone read what I wrote.
Never again. Yeah.
Why would I ever put in pen and paper what I don't? Why would I put my secrets? Why would I write about the shadow?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say focus on the product of the product, and by the way, if that doesn't make sense for parents out there, I can make it very clear. I'm not a parent, so let me see if I can get into your mind for a moment. But parents, you bring your kids to an amusement park. Let's say you get to Disney. You walk up to the counter and you give them all your money because that's how much it costs these days.
Yeah.
And parents, what do they give you in return? What's the product? A bracelet. They give you a bracelet. And by the way, if you spend more money, you get a more expensive bracelet. That's the product. You go through the park, you check into the hotel, you do the blah, 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 you do the blah, blah. 3 days later, you check out of the hotel, you drive or fly home. Here's the deal. Monday morning, here's the deal. You do not walk into the office and show people the bracelet. You don't show them the receipt. Hey, look how much money I spent. You talk about the product of the product. So out of the shadows, are you willing to get into the shadow? Are you willing to hold a pen and let yourself see the deepest, darkest, most sickening, hardest, challenging, fear-filled thoughts in your mind on a piece of paper? Now, there's 2 things that I'll talk about right now. One's called overwriting, and then I'll get to the second one in just a moment. Do I have time for this? I got to check you on time.
This is all you. You are good here.
Overwriting. So I take out a piece of paper, usually grab one from the printer, 8.5 by 11. It's beautiful. I take my favorite pen because I've got them all right here on my desk. And what I do, I start writing. Now, what's happening is as I write, I'm kind of safe. I'm writing the stuff that's safe. Now, on a typical 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, I'm writing, I can usually get about 150 to 200 words. I get to that 150th, 200th word, bottom right-hand corner. I overwrite. It means I go back to the top and I overwrite what I wrote, and I go deeper. And I challenge myself, Trip, 7 overwrites. 7. And here's the deal. By the 7th one, can't see any of it. Can't read any of it. I challenge any of you to do this.
Yeah, I'm going to do this.
Can't read it, but you wrote it. You faced it. You let yourself see in your mind. If I talked to my spouse half as negatively as I talked to myself, she'd have left me 2 decades ago. How is it that I will let myself tell myself the things that I have go in my head? But when I see it on a piece of paper, now, if overwriting's not enough, then I'll give you these 2 outs. One is a shredder and one is a fireplace. You see, I say journaling, Trip, and people think, oh, journal, I got to put it in a book and got to put it on my
with a lock
shelf.
and all this other stuff. Yeah.
That's one, but that's the product. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I don't know if I can afford to go to therapy. Now, those of you who are on the fence, when you see a therapist, when you see a counselor, they're going to hold a space for you to see what you say to yourself. We need the product of the product. Don't get hung up on the product. The bullet journal, that was an amazing way for that company to make money. Amazing. Because they sold a lot of them. But I guarantee you, what people wrote in their bullet journals won't touch what some of you listening to this will write if you do an overwrite.
I like that. And I like too, it goes back to someone I was talking to you about before we went on the air, Noble Gibbons. He was saying, write stuff out, write a letter to someone, put everything you got into it, rip it up, shred it, burn it, crumple
They'll
it
get
up,
it. They'll
save
get
it. Yep, exactly. He's like, but it's the fact you're getting it out of here and on to this is what's most important. No, that's awesome. And final thing for you, this has been an awesome episode. We're definitely gonna have to get you back for a full episode of The Shadows podcast. What book or books would you recommend for our listeners out there?
Got two. First book is called Psycho-Cybernetics by a cat named Maxwell Maltz. Cybernetic principle states our brain focuses on what we tell it to look for. It ignores what we decide not to look for. So you and I, a little backstory, we communicated before we got to do this recording.
Mm-hmm.
What did I tell you to do?
Oh, you're talking about on my way home?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you told me on the way home. I was actually running late. Sent you a Marco Polo, said, hey, I'm running a little late. I'm in the car with my wife, but I will be home soon. You said, get home safe, but I want you to find something that you've never seen before on your way home. And I did. I found a gazebo.
And what did a gazebo mean to you?
I got married in a gazebo in Sumter, South Carolina. So it reminded me of love. It reminded me of marriage. It reminded me of that special moment. So it was good.
All we need to do for our airmen and guardians and Americans and humans is ask them to focus on what we want them to focus on. I can outcompete anybody on how terrible today was. I got proof. I can go to a social media feed. I can go to a news feed. I can go to an internet website, and I will outcompete you every day of the week, twice on Sunday, with how bad things are, if I focus on that. The cybernetic principle states, once I decide what it is I want to see, the universe will give it to me. The second book I need all of you to read, because you're influencers. All of you listening to this are influencers. How do I know? Because we're influencing you. That's why you would listen to a podcast, to get influenced. So why don't you go read the book on influence called, are you ready for this? Influence.
I'm writing that down.
It's by a guy named Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, Robert Cialdini. And he is the world's preeminent expert on what you can do to get somebody to say yes. Good news, there's just 6 things. There's just 6 things that you can get better at today, so that when you walk into your boss's office tomorrow, when you walk into your kid's bedroom tonight, when you walk into dinner with your spouse, and you need them to say yes to you, you just do a couple of these 6 things. So Psycho-Cybernetics, influence, take 2 of those. Call me in the morning.
I like it. Yep. Adding them to my Amazon cart, and those both will be listed on the book recommendations at theshadowspodcast.com. So thank you, Sarah, for that. Final comments for our listeners before we wrap up this first of our 3 Rise from the Shadows season finales.
Thank you. I love you. I'm amazed by you. Quick, go listen to the other folks. We got good stuff for you.
Awesome. Well, folks, stay tuned. We got 2 more coming your way.
You know, most people go through life aiming at nothing and hit it with amazing accuracy. And they find themselves just feeling stuck in a rut, wondering if this is all there is. And I'm here to tell you, no, it is not. And life is too dang short to live it stuck in a rut. So check out beyondtherut.com and listen to episodes of other people who are also feeling stuck in a rut, asking themselves the same questions you are around their faith, their family, their fitness, their finances, and just their outlook on future possibility. And there, we hope that you are encouraged and inspired to make your own path and live life beyond the rut. So again, go check out beyondtherut.com, where you can find blog posts and podcast episodes, as well as some tools to help you design the targets you wish to hit in life in those 5 F's. faith, family, fitness, finances, and future possibility. Because again, life is too dang short to live it stuck in a rut. Now go check it out.
Beyond the rut. Where do we send the royalties? That's done. It's yours.
Welcome back to Rise from the Shadows. And first of all, we want to give a very special thanks to Jason Womack. Make sure you look him up on LinkedIn, Jason J.W. Womack. Next up, we have Sejal Thakkar. She's a TEDx speaker. She has a YouTube video that you can check out titled The Pain, the Power, the Paradox of Bias. She is the Chief Civility Officer at Train Extra. She is the Chief Culture Officer at Nobody Studios. And today, we are fortunate enough to have her here with us to talk to us about unconscious bias. Ladies and gentlemen, Sejal Thakkar.
So today, I really wanted to touch on a topic that's really dear to my heart. And, in March of this year, I did a TEDx talk on a topic that I felt there was just not enough education. There was a lack of awareness on the issue of bias. And so I did a TEDx talk on this topic, and I really want to talk to you a little bit more about my journey and why that conversation was important for me. The reason for the TEDx talk is that in November of 2017, I opened up my own company called Train Extra. And my focus there was to really educate people on how do we create better workplace environments and how do we create better workplace cultures? Because I have an employment law background, and as an attorney, I saw so many cases of harassment and discrimination where I believe that, hey, if we address this problem differently, if we address it proactively, and we actually make everybody be a part of the solution, that we can prevent these lawsuits and all this pain and suffering and all of these issues that were happening that were creating these toxic workplaces. So that led me to wanting to really focus in on how do we raise awareness on certain issues. And as I started doing this work and I was doing these workshops, I also have a passion for diversity and inclusion work as well. And so as I was doing this work, it became really obvious to me that people really didn't understand bias, and specifically unconscious bias, right? And so when I started to learn about that, I was, it really angered me that I didn't learn until way into my career how unconscious bias works. And I'm an attorney, and there's no education on it in undergraduate school. I didn't learn anything about it in law school. I am a litigator, representing people, and the decisions and the actions I was taking could impact people's lives. And yet I didn't know this about unconscious bias and how it works. And so when I started learning about it, I was like, oh my God, this is huge. And then everything that happened last year and a half, right, with all of the fear because of the pandemic, the racism that came to the surface, it was nothing new, but it just came up to the top, and all of the Asian hate and Pacific hate crimes that started happening, I really said, I want to do more in this space, because I felt like what we were doing up until now has been to address symptoms of problems like racism, sexism. So we're addressing the symptoms of it, but not really getting to the root cause. And in my opinion, if we can educate people on unconscious bias, which is a majority of what impacts the decisions that we make and the actions that we take, then people are empowered, and that they can then take more ownership of their own behaviors rather than being on autopilot, which is really where we are when we're not aware of how our unconscious bias works. So in the TEDx talk I did, I really wanted to show bias from three different perspectives, one being the pain of bias, because bias is not one-dimensional. And I think a lot of people think it is one-dimensional, and that really prevents us, in my opinion, of really getting to true inclusion. And so I really wanted to show that bias is not one-dimensional and that it impacts every single person on the planet, right? So I wanted a conversation that applied to everybody. And so I shared in that talk, the pain of bias and really what I went through growing up as a daughter of immigrants in an all Italian neighborhood, and being on the receiving end of bias, sort of what I went through. And I talk about that part of my journey. And then I talk about the paradox of bias, which is really, the work that I had to do on myself to overcome my own biases. And then what I learned as being a defense attorney and seeing bias from a whole different perspective, because now I was actually a defense attorney. So now I was representing those that were accused of being biased from against other people. And so I got to see prejudice and bias from a whole different standpoint. And then I started learning about unconscious bias and the power that that has over our actions. And I was like, wow. So I talk about the science of unconscious bias, and I give just some idea of how it's normal. And then I also provide some strategies in my TEDx talk about, how we can mitigate the impacts of it, and really how we can build more meaningful relationships with each other by just simple strategies, And so I use this acronym. It's called the HAT acronym. And I say, the H stands for hold off. When you meet somebody that's different than you, and we're hardwired to kind of be drawn to people that are similar to us, that are like us, and we know that about ourselves. And so when we meet somebody that might be different than us, that, we want to hold off, like question our assumptions, our initial judgments that we're making about that person, because we know that we might be biased in those initial impressions that we have of that person. And then it's A is to ask why, ask why, ask yourself, why am I having this, whether it's a positive or negative reaction towards somebody, and really doing that self-reflection work. And then T is take action, and so I think, a lot of people think this needs to be complicated. It really doesn't. And so I talk about the golden rule versus the platinum rule. The golden rule is something that I think most of us are familiar with, which is treat other people in the way that you want to be treated. And I encourage people to use the platinum rule, which is to treat people in the way that they want to be treated. And so this is huge, because the only way that you can treat people in the way they want to be treated, you have to make the time and the effort to get to know people, and rather than just relying on your initial judgments of that person. So yeah, so the TEDx talk is a huge part of why I wanted to do this conversation today. And I just encourage everybody that watches this to do their part, and just to really start with themselves, and really to understand your own unconscious bias. And there are simple tools out there that you can use, like, for example, the implicit association test. It's an online tool that was created by Harvard University, by University of Virginia, University of Washington. And a bunch of these psychologists got together and created this online tool, which is broken out into several different, I think it's like 14 or 16 different categories: race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. But you take this online tool, and it gives you an idea of what your natural preferences are, your natural tendencies. And this is such valuable information, because then having that information, you can, especially when you're making important decisions, you can remind yourself to say, hey, I'm naturally predisposed, have these preconceived notions. And so let me check those at the door, and let me make sure that I'm being fair to this person that's here in front of me. And I'm really connecting with them on a deeper level, rather than just kind of relying on these shortcuts my brain might be doing. Right. So I just urge everybody to take that test, and it's not something that you need to take in one sitting, just break it out, and it's ongoing work, it's a lifelong process, but it's totally worth it, because you can really get past some of your own self-limiting beliefs that we've all got because of our own lived experiences that we've gone through. And I do this work for a living, and I'm always learning more and more about my own. And it's amazing once you realize what they are, which is the first step, then you can actually implement strategies to even mitigate it even more. I mean, the HAT strategy is just a general strategy that applies to all biases, right? But then once you start to learn I think they've identified 180 different types of cognitive biases. So once you identify that, oh, wait, I've got this tendency, you can then, have specific strategies for that specific cognitive shortcut that you're more likely to take, right? So there's a lot that goes behind it. And so if you're interested in learning more about this, I recommend that you follow me on LinkedIn. That's the social media that I'm really active on. And I'm really very intentional about putting out solid information and articles and research in this area, because I think it's an area, for all the reasons I've already stated, that everybody needs to understand and learn more about. So thank you for listening.
Yo, what's up, everyone? This is Joe Bogdan from the Llama Leadership Team and co-host of the Llama Lounge podcast. And I wanted to share with you this amazing opportunity to become a published author and become a fire starter. Does the thought of collaborating and connecting with a diverse group of creative thought leaders appeal to you? Well, it did to me, and joining the Firestarters book project was an amazingly easy and fun way to get my feet wet in the published author space. Shay and Christine made it so easy to navigate through the publishing realm and gave me the blessed opportunity to share my story with the world, and they would love to do the same for you. They are seeking aspiring authors like you to collaborate with them, and the best part is that they are going to do all of the hard work for you. All you have to do is commit to the process. You have nothing to lose and so much to gain. So join the team by visiting firestartersbookproject.com and tell them Joe sent you. It will change your life for the better, I promise.
All right, I want to welcome everybody back to Rise from the Shadows. Ma'am, that was an awesome brief. I really enjoyed that. So thank you, first of all, for joining us here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I really do.
Yeah. And first question I want to ask you, kind of, building off what you talked about, all of us, we all have biases. Where do you think our biases stem from?
Yeah, for each one of us, it's different. It comes from what we've been exposed to in our life, right? So your culture, your family, your religion, where you went to school, where you live. And that's, that's really, well, I guess I should clarify. It depends on whether you're talking about conscious bias or unconscious bias, right? So some of it for unconscious bias is just part of your hardwiring, right? And then the rest of it comes from our lived experiences and what we've been exposed to.
Yeah. Next question for you too is, what do you think is the connection between unconscious biases and microaggressions?
Yeah, and so microaggressions, first of all, are really these comments, these actions, insults, things that people do unconsciously. So they're not aware of these actions that they're taking or these things that they're doing. And they're directed at people of a certain marginalized group. So it could be any marginalized group, right? Race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, etc. And so because a lot of stereotypes that we see are deeply ingrained in our culture, without knowing it, unintentionally, you're engaging in these behaviors that is sending these harmful, that is sending these negative biases that you hold towards that marginalized person. And so you're not intending to harm them. It's happening unconsciously. And it's not a matter of intention, but the important thing is that the impact is what really is important, And so the people that are on the receiving end of these microaggressions are dealing with these every day, and it could be all different formats. It could be the tone of somebody's voice. It could be behaviors, whether you exclude somebody, whether you make eye contact with somebody. It could come in a lot of different forms, but they're constantly being bombarded with those. And so, for example, asking somebody, where are you from? And then the person says, I'm from, for me, for example, you ask me where I'm from and I'm like, I'm from Chicago. And then you're like, no, but where are you really from? And I'm like, yeah. I was born in Chicago, this is where I'm from. And no, where are you really, really, really from? And then you're like, okay, and so after a while, it's just, it's harmful. There's nothing micro about it. It actually makes you feel like you don't belong here, like you're not from here, that you're different. And so you get this other feeling, and then that's emotionally taxing on people. And so we want to educate people about unconscious bias. Like that's my mission right now, is because if you don't even know about what your unconscious biases are, we can't prevent that harm from happening. And in order to make a change, we again go back to the root cause, which is let's start educating people on this topic earlier. In fact, in school when they're children, so that you can start understanding how it works and put strategies, into place way earlier, rather than having to do it when you've been doing the same thing over and over again for like 40 plus years or whatever. And then you're like, oh, well, now I gotta undo all of that. But the good news is it's totally possible. Our brains can be rewired, and there's here's the thing, lots of information has come out just over the last decade that we didn't know before. And so now that we know this information, we can use it to our advantage, and it can be done. Right? It totally can be done. I would not be doing this work and really pouring myself into this topic if I didn't think it could work. Right? So.
You brought up something too. I like the fact that there's now assessments that you can take to kind of see where you're, and there's one that we have in professional military education that I remember when they first came out, the results would come back and it's like, oh my gosh, I favor white students versus black students. I cannot believe that. And they would get offended. I'm like, it's not to be taken like that. It's just so you could see that this could potentially be something that if you're not aware of.
Yeah,
so
and it's not intentional. It's just how you are because of what you've been exposed to. And so it's valuable to know that, because then when you are making that decision, you can just kind of say, hey, I have a tendency to lean in this direction. So let me check myself and make sure I stay in the middle. That's what I did as an attorney, because I was discovering my own biases. Remember, I told you, in the TEDx talk, I talk about how I was harassed and bullied. And so knowing that the people that harassed and bullied me were of a certain race, of a certain culture, like to this day, I have a negative bias towards that person. That doesn't make me a bad person. I've gone through something really bad, horrible in my life. I'm going to feel that way for the rest of my life. But now that I know that, when I'm interviewing somebody, I have to check myself to say, hey, you've got this negative bias, beware, and then make sure you're giving this person a fair chance, right? And that's what we're asking people to do. Is we're not saying you can't have these thoughts or you can't have these beliefs. We're just saying we want you to change your behavior so it doesn't continue to harm people, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you've mentioned your TED Talk a couple of times. If our listeners out there, and I highly encourage our listeners out there to go listen to it, where can they find your TED Talk?
Yeah, so it's on YouTube. It's called The Pain, the Paradox, and Power of Bias. And again, if you follow me on LinkedIn, it's right there in my featured video section as well. So yes, please follow me. I would love to have more people that are, of the same mindset, that want to grow and that want to really make a difference. Like, follow me on there and let's do this together.
Yeah. How was that doing a TED Talk during the pandemic?
Trip, I actually had it was on my list. It was on my bucket list, obviously, to do a TEDx talk someday, but it was not anything I was thinking about last year. I lost a significant portion of my business, because of the pandemic. And so I was really focused in on just making it from month to month. Right. And so, but I had put out a video on LinkedIn on bias, and one of my connections saw it. And, we had a conversation, and then during that, later on, she reached back out to me and said, hey, I really think you should do a TEDx talk on this topic, and then everything that was going on in the world, I was like, you know what, why not? Let me do it. And so she really helped me put it together. And so I did it, but it was one of those things that came to me. Like, honestly, I didn't go out looking for it. It just sort of came my way. And I was like grateful, because as you can already tell, I'm very passionate about this topic. So I was like, here's another way for me to share that information. Right. So.
Yeah, we'll have the link for that in our episode description for this as well, but definitely go follow her on LinkedIn. And then if someone listening to this, they want to find out more about unconscious biases, do you have a book you would recommend to them?
Yeah. And here, I have one right here. Actually, I'm going to recommend this one. It talks about unconscious bias, but I think this is really more important for people to understand is the question you asked me about, microaggressions. Mm-hmm. So this is called The Subtle Acts of Exclusion, by Tiffany Jana, Jana, and Michael Baran. But it talks about how to understand, identify, and stop microaggressions. And it's really awesome and really important, because I think a lot of times people see this stuff happening and they want to do something. They have good intentions, but they just don't know what to do in those situations. They don't know what to say. Very practical advice that, like, literally you can apply in any one of these situations, no matter where you're at. So great recommendation.
This has been very informative, very good Rise from the Shadows episode. I couldn't have thought of a better guest to kick things off with our season finale here. And we're definitely going to have you back, ma'am. It was super easy for you and I to get on the same schedule to get this this booked here. But if they want to find out more information about you, you've mentioned LinkedIn.
Yep.
Give them everything they need to find you.
Okay. So one thing we didn't talk about was Nobody Studios. And so I've recently taken on a position of Chief Culture Officer at a venture studio. And we are doing some super exciting things in the entrepreneurship area of venture studios, of startups. And I'm just really excited. So I would say if you want to learn more about the studio, and you can look at www.nobodystudios.com. If you want to learn more about my work that I'm doing, as far as my workshops, my public speaking, and the stuff that I'm doing under my own business, which is Train Extra, then you can go to my website, which is www.trainxtra.com. And so those would be the two websites that I would say check out if you want to learn more about kind of what I'm up to and where I'm at these days.
Man, what final comments do you have for our listeners?
Just start with yourself and start learning about your biases, and that would be amazing.
What is up, good people? Josh White here from the Hero Front Podcast, and I want to thank you for taking a minute to hear what I'm all about. Look, if you stop by Hero Front, you're going to hear inspirational stories from some of the greatest heroes around the world. This includes leaders in business, inspiring authors, innovative entrepreneurs, and motivational speakers. Now, the one thing that they all have in common is they will all share stories of resilience, and their hope is to inspire those struggling with their mental health or looking to step up their game to the next level. Some of these heroes you are very familiar with, and others you have never heard of them until now. Speaking from personal experience, I have struggled greatly and failed many, many times. My goal to you, the listener, the viewer, is to inspire you, to give you that purpose that I was searching for all my life, to give you the tools to succeed, to let you know that you are not alone, and to hopefully give you the courage to take that first step. You're not alone, I got your back. So come on by the Hero Front Podcast every Wednesday, and we'll get after it together.
All right, we want to thank Sejal Thakkar for taking time out of her extremely busy schedule to be a guest here on our season finale of Rise from the Shadows. We have one more briefer left for you today. Jeff Reyes. He is a senior non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force. He has spent time in security forces, and now he is the commandant at the Patrick Airman Leadership School. And he's here today to talk to you about grind and shine. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Reyes.
Let me paint a picture for you from about a year ago. 2:15 in the morning, the alarm goes off. And I roll out of bed to get ready for the day. But my work shift was 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. And sometimes 6 in the morning to 6 at night, but different shifts. So why was I waking up early enough to drive through the gate a whole 3 hours before my shift actually started? To help answer that, let's rewind to the previous day. Other than the requirements that had to be done prior to the start of the shift, it actually started at 6. And it was filled with a daily grind of unknowns. Along with the standard duties associated with providing base security and law enforcement, I had to make time to check on each member of the team that's spread out all across the base at different locations. And by checking on them, I don't mean just ensuring they had the proper duty equipment or the job knowledge to do their job with little to no supervision, or even that they were actually doing their job. More importantly, I was checking on that person wearing the uniform, that person underneath the equipment. But that's a whole different conversation. The shift was also packed with fielding random questions from leadership because they always want to know what's the status on this or that. Why is Airman so-and-so doing this, all the way across the base, even though I'm standing right there in front of them. Just anything to add on top of the list of everything else I'm doing. Not to mention, throughout the shift, you need to do those things that you write on the board so you don't forget. Things to make sure your team meets certain timelines, or the things you need to remember to do in order to take care of your team members on paper. And even with a small team of 15 to 20, those tasks add up. Without a doubt, there's work left over for tomorrow. So what happens after the shift? Even though the shift ended at 2 o'clock, my team still needed to be relieved from wherever they were and travel back to the office, back to the building, and turn in their equipment, and then make sure everything's ready for the next day. And by that point, we're looking at the shift's end plus 45 minutes-ish. And that's on the best case scenario, where, let's say, those visits from earlier didn't generate anything that required some sort of follow-up or a time-sensitive action of some sort. Now we're at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, finally heading home, just in time for the kids to be home from school with homework that needs my attention. And y'all, middle school math homework is absolutely no joke. So by around 6 in the evening, the family sat down for dinner, conversation about everyone's day. And keep in mind that the middle school pre-adolescent kids, they come home with more potential issues than just homework. And which, by the way, that's not the only kid in the house. There's more. And after dinner, the family time, you make sure things are done around the house, everything's good to go. Most importantly, some attention to my wife, who's been holding it down at the house the whole time I've been at work. Then things start to wind down. And anyone with kids can relate to how much needs to be done in order to get those little ones into bed. Finally, 9, 10 o'clock, somewhere around there, I put my head on the pillow to get some rest. And I speak for a large portion of the civilization, probably, when I say that laying down at 10 o'clock really means that I'm still awake for another 30 minutes, an hour. And you're thinking about whatever's on your mind, possibly second guessing some of the decisions you made throughout the day. You're watching two guys build some immaculate hut in the middle of the jungle with a stick. Just anything. And so why did I go through that long rambling of a jam-packed day? How does this pertain to where we all started in the beginning of the story? Well, from the time my shift started to the second I laid down, my attention was consistently needed elsewhere. With all of that going on, in order for my attention to be focused on all of those other people, anything I wanted to do for myself needed to be done when no one else needed me, while everyone else was sleeping. My me time had to be done while I was not missing out on something anyone else was doing. And that brings us back to that 2:15 alarm. It's going off. I turn it off before the noise wakes up my wife, and I get ready in order to be in the gym by 3 in the morning. That workout not only clears my mind and jumpstarts my body, but it also keeps me in shape to perform my job and reminds me that I can keep pushing no matter how much it hurts, no matter how tired I am, or whatever other excuse decides to creep up. And by 4:30, I'm in the shower getting dressed for duty in order to be the first one in the shop, making sure that my team has everything they needed in order to start that grind that we talked about all over again. Now, this example right here is exactly what we talk about when we say grind and shine.
Yo, what's up? This is Joe from the Llama Lounge podcast, a proud member of the Lima Charlie Network. If you are interested in listening to diverse conversations about all things life, learning, and leadership between leaders and experts in the military as well as across the civilian industry, follow the Llama Lounge on all podcast platforms and Llama Leadership on all social media outlets. And visit our website at llama-leadership.com. New episodes post every Tuesday. We cannot wait to have you join us. In the meantime, be safe, stay healthy, and keep growing. Llama's out.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Rise from the Shadows. We just had our final briefer of the day. And I just want to say, we're both very thankful right now that this is just audio. We were just talking before we came on here. We're both having kind of a rough time. I cannot for the life of me get my ring light set up going. It looks like I'm absolutely being fried under this tanning bed of sorts. Um,
I got a bad hair day going on, so
we both do. We said we look like what, Ninja Turtles. Just it's not working for us. But no, awesome message that you delivered here with Grind and Shine. And first of all, thank you for joining us here on Rise from the Shadows. I actually trusted you enough to have you on here.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you before we get started. Tell our listeners about the evolution.
Okay, so believe it or not, it started off as a joke. Back when The Rock was making his videos in the gym, like focus, you know,
and then he smiles, focus.
Yeah, I would have the most random messages in the gym, and just never took any of it seriously. Till one day, a guy, his name was Jeremy, came up, and he came to say hi. I didn't recognize him. I felt bad, and he's, hey man, it's me, Jeremy. Bro, I lost 40 pounds. He said, every morning when you made those videos, I thought you were talking to me.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that completely caught me off guard. So then I took it a little bit more seriously. And then at the time I was teaching the security forces officer course, the tech training. And some of those messages carried over to the students, and they would, you know, I'm always getting these messages. Hey, you know, thank you for this message that you sent. What you posted really meant a lot, blah, blah, you know, just things like that.
Yeah.
So that really forced me to take it serious, because even though I didn't realize it, I had a legit audience. And so then I was like, oh wow, I gotta stop messing around, just making jokes. Let's give some of these people that you never know who's listening. So you put a message out there, you don't know who needed it that day.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I wanted to reach a broader audience because, you know, was it like 5 years ago, maybe, Chief Wright, the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force at the time, his staff ran across a video and they're like, hey, wow, this is great. Can we share it? And I'm like, bro, you guys have a lot more stripes than me. I'm not going to tell you no. So, you know, there, bam, the top guy, the man is sharing my stuff. And again, forcing me to, hey, take this more seriously, put more thought into it. If people, they are buying into what you're saying now, imagine if you took it more seriously versus just random ideas. So throughout that whole time from the beginning, my intent every time was to keep it real, giving the real message that either people need to hear or what people are thinking already, but just don't have the voice to put it out there. And then through COVID, it kind of turned from the development, because so much light was put on these professional developments in the virtual world. So let's have some fun again. And now I just do random YouTube videos. I'll do vlogs, woodworking, fishing with the kids. So like Grind and Shine is continuously evolving, but what it all focuses on is my life is a zoo, and we get through it with the family working hard.
Yeah. Smiles on your faces.
All the time. Well,
that's one thing about your videos, though. You're always positive vibes from the videos. It's nothing doom and gloom. It's always good stuff. And I don't know if you really noticed that, but all your videos, y'all can just be sitting there, you and, you know, your daughter sitting there doing like the drums or something. And it's just like, man, this is good stuff. So yeah,
you got to be positive, bro. You know, so no matter how bad, my mom used to always say growing up that no matter how bad situation is, it could always be worse.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to stay positive through everything. And I say it all the time that, you know, a man with no shoes is going to stop complaining when he sees a man with no feet. So we just try to keep a positive outlook on it, no matter what's going on. If you're not having fun, then what's the point of doing it? So.
Do you find that to be more infectious than being around those negative people? Because, you know, oftentimes you can have a room of 15 people, one negative person, and it tends to spread quicker than the positivity. But do you find there's more power in positivity?
Yes, because it gives people something to hope for.
Yeah.
If we can give them some, I mean, same way with, you know, not sure how many people in the audience are religious, but that faith and the religion gives people something to believe in. So if you can walk into a room, no matter how negative the people are, and if we can give them one little sliver of positivity, and they can be like, wow, maybe if I focus, if I work hard, if I do this or that, I can be positive like that. Look, he's smiling. he doesn't hate it here.
Yeah.
I would like to come into a place and not hate it wherever I am. Let me try that.
Yeah.
So, yes. Very.
Yeah, that is true. And it's funny because people will say like, oh, negative. It's just we're living in a negative world. If you have that mindset, then yeah, you absolutely do. But if you choose to, I adjusted my mindset several years ago to more of I was very much doom and gloom and doubt and anxiety and stressed out about the unknown of tomorrow. And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, looking back, there was nothing to worry about. Just live life. And it really changed my outlook in general. So yeah, I think people will hear your message. They'll probably focus on the grind, but I encourage them to focus on the shine part. And yeah. You're going to be out there grinding all the time anyways, but shine while you're doing it. And stay positive. See what I did there?
I like that. That was clever guy.
Yeah.
You should host a podcast or something when you
Or
think on the
teach.
fly like that.
Should be an instructor.
Yeah, you should teach. No, you know what? Better than that. You should teach people how to teach.
I promise you I will do that in 2022. Promise you. Starting January 6th, I will start doing that, to be specific. You are currently the commandant over at Patrick Airman Leadership School. What's the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself from, or your schedule actually, from being a defender, which for our civilian arts is equivalent to being a military police officer, to being commandant running a schoolhouse?
Oh, the schedule wise, I would say it's definitely more predictable. Just with the nature of having schoolhouse hours or traditional academic hours versus, the 8 or 12-hour shifts that I talked about before in the early mornings. Now, I mean, you picture any academic environment, it's more of like a business banker hours. And it's also great to know that I most likely will not be, called in to do something on the weekend or my time off. So it's fairly rewarding coming into this transition.
And, part of that, change of schedule, change of pace, shifting of hours that you have, you said you give yourself like plenty of time at the beginning of the day. And I know when you talked about your grind and shine message, you were really talking about mainly your time as a defender. But why do you think that's so important for us to give ourselves that time to get our day started just right?
Just the take on that is in the military, Air Force specifically, where, we've been taught since day one, the whole service before self and the servant leadership. These are all great concepts and I love to live them. Taking care of other people is amazing. And there's no more rewarding idea than that. But the nature of it is, if we are constantly chipping away pieces of ourselves to give out, then eventually there's nothing left for us. There's no more of us to give away. So creating that time to ground yourself and making the time to take care of you, make sure that you remain a human yourself so that you can still give to others when you need to.
Yeah, I think one thing that I struggled with for a long time in my career was trying to get every single second of sleep that I could get. And then you roll out of bed, you get your day going after you have Macho Man Randy Savaged your alarm clock about 6 or 7 times. And then you get up and you get going. And then it's like you feel like you're constantly playing catch up. And then you just want to get home, relax, rinse, repeat all over again. But, I mentioned to you when we talked about this previously that your message goes very well hand in hand with 5 Gears, one of the lessons that I actually teach. And we talk about setting that time aside at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, just for you to put back into you. And your message, especially tomorrow, where we start off on episode 13 with Mary Polanco, plays perfect with her message. What are some things you do at the end of the day to kind of unwind? Because you talked about that, not just work, 4th gear of teaching, of just go, multitasking, but you get home and you talk about, you get home and then you got stuff to do at the house. You got, dishes, kids, you're like numerous kids. It's just all kinds of stuff.
A lot of kids, Bodie. Like,
yeah. It's like gremlins. so it's just like you've constantly, you're going and going and going. How do you find that time just to unplug and just recharge?
Ooh, that time hits us a lot right before we lay down. And I say we, my wife and I, because, the whole daily grind of the military, the job, everything. At the same time, my wife's doing her own thing. She runs a side business. She has another contract job. She just has a lot going on. So it's like we have parallel lives throughout the day that we're just constantly on the grind doing stuff. And then at the end of the work day, when I come home, then we merge. And then that's when it's the family time. But then right before bed is when we're kind of like, all right, let's sit down, let our hair, I let my hair down, kick our feet up. And it's when we kind of get to not really reconnect, but just talk about what's been on our mind throughout the day, what's new. And just that little bit of changing the pace to just conversate is so much better. And it kind of puts you in a better state of mind to rest, really, because you're no longer thinking about oh, wow, we have to do this. This has to be done. Mm-hmm. It's less stressful. We can conversate amongst ourselves and just relax.
Yeah, I said that our minds are like computers, and we have like all of which I know you don't like, and we have all these files that are open. And when we go to bed, if we don't get that time to just relax, to kind of break away from the daily grind, then our mind is like trying to hard boot a computer down with 15 files open. Our mind is going to basically say, are you sure you want to shut down? You've got all this stuff coming up that you're basically worrying about. So yeah, you're not going to get a good night's sleep. You're going to be tossing and turning. So I think that's a very important message, what you said there about just, let your hair down, kick your feet up, relax, just let all those worries, all that stuff, just wait until tomorrow. And as a commandant, how have you found yourself, because the big thing that goes into this is prioritizing. How have you found yourself prioritizing to where you can actually have those moments of just, even if they're just little slivers of just silence?
Prioritizing for that. Wow. That is, I believe I start that off with building a really solid connection with the instructors.
Yeah.
As the commandant, you're running the operations of the school. I make it a point to connect with the students throughout the day, which some schoolhouses don't get to do because they are larger. We only have one class on the ground at a time.
Or the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, just so much different going on as to compared to our small school. So I make it a point to connect with the students and even more so connect with my instructors. And that relationship I build with them is like, they understand from the second I walk in the door to the second we part ways at the end of the day. I belong to them. Everything they need, we will get it done.
Yeah.
And they kind of understand that at the same time, when I need my me time, it's like, okay, guys, we have worked him to the bone. Let's let him recharge. Kind of like, you put your phone on the charger at night, you wake up and it's back to 100%. They put me on the charger when it's my me time. That way they can just use and abuse me throughout the day as they see fit.
To kind of wrap this episode up, most underrated from a television series that has so many life lessons. It had, you get where I'm going. It had emergent leadership issues before emergent leadership issues.
Oh, before they were even a thing.
Before it was
resiliency,
even a thing.
Resiliency before it was a buzzword.
Substance abuse, all this stuff. It stems from Saved by the Bell.
Absolutely. And there is no hope in dope.
Well, exactly. Johnny Dakota and all those great characters.
Oh, man.
Who is the most, and you're on the record here, who's the most underrated Saved by the Bell character ever?
Oh, why would you do this right now?
Well, I mean, you just have
Rod Belding.
Rod
Belding, Mr. Belding's younger, cooler brother with the long hair.
And what's the lesson we learned from Rod Belding?
So, because the main characters of Saved by the Bell are teenagers, which most of us watched it when we were teenagers.
Yeah.
Now we see this adult coming in, and depending on the approach, the adult can either be, significantly influential, or they tune them out, just like today.
Mm-hmm.
But Rod Belding taught us that the cool guy that comes in and captures our attention
can go whitewater rafting with you.
And they can take you on a field trip to go whitewater rafting and teach CPR. Remember, he had them making out trying to do CPR. But the thing that Rod Belding lacked, and it's such an awesome lesson for us, is that he wasn't genuine and he didn't follow through.
Mm.
So we have these adults coming into people's lives as leaders, and if they're not genuine, they're bound to let us down, just like he did when he split and Mr. Belding had to pick up the pieces.
Yeah. And
yes,
Richard Belding had felt betrayed before that.
He did. He was like, I vouched for you, bro. You were my little brother.
Yeah. And he ran off with a flight attendant or something, wasn't it?
Man, some stewardess. Yes.
Yeah. Classic Rod Belding. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
Odie, thank you so much, man. This was one amazing opportunity. I appreciate it.
Hey, Shadows listeners. If you're looking to make some extra income that also impacts people, then you need to look at becoming a certified leadership coach with Giant. If you don't already know, Giant has been in the leadership space for over 13 years. I got certified through Giant in 2018, and I've been teaching ever since. Just to give you some context, they used to own and operate the John Maxwell brands. They ran the LeaderCast conferences where Jim Collins, Henry Cloud, Malcolm Gladwell, and Simon Sinek, just to name a few, were regular speakers. They have over 500 coaches worldwide, working in over 127 countries, and are being hired by companies like Google, Chick-fil-A, Pfizer, Delta, and more. And yes, you can do this too. I know this might sound intimidating, but Giant will literally give you everything you need to start your own coaching business from scratch. You get hands-on training from top-level coaches to learn the exact methodology and tools that six-figure coaches are using. You get an all-in-one online platform to run your entire coaching business, even if you want to work 100% remotely. And you'll get to join a thriving community of coaches from all around the world. To get started, Giant is hosting a coaching business workshop to help you learn the ins and outs of how to build a successful coaching business. This is both for experienced coaches, consultants, and those who are looking to start coaching and consulting with little to no experience. If you want to hear the really good news, this whole workshop, it's free, 100% free. And you can reserve your spot by going to giant.tv/shadows. Why not give it a shot? What's better than making a positive change in people's lives and making some extra money in the process? Giant launches a new hiring cohort every month. Now, they only have 20 coaching slots available each month, so it's first come, first serve. So go ahead and make sure you reserve your spot. If you're ready to make an impact and get paid doing it, go to giant.tv/shadows, giant.tv/shadows.
All right, welcome back to the season finale of Rise from the Shadows. We want to give Jeff Reyes a huge thanks for taking time out of his schedule as Commandant to join us here on our season finale. And make sure you stay tuned tomorrow for our final day. We have 3 more briefers and 3 more amazing topics. We have a senior non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force, and she's about to retire. Mary Polanco, she's going to be talking to you about listening to the quiet. And then the connective tissue, as somebody told me the other day, in this episode is going to be amazing because the speaker we have following her, another senior non-commissioned officer in the United States Air Force, and my former commandant, Demetrius Booth. He's going to talk to you about here, about being present. And then finally, we wrap things up with one of the most tenacious people I know, Kim Meckwood. She is the creator and founder of the Click and Carry. She is a Shark Tank contestant who she will tell you 7, 8. She lost count of how many times she tried to get on Shark Tank, but she eventually became a Shark Tank winner. And she is a cancer survivor. And she is going to talk to you about persistence. So make sure you join us for our finale tomorrow on all available podcast platforms and theshadowspodcast.com. We'd like to thank all of our listeners for taking time out of your schedule to listen to The Shadows Podcast and Rise from the Shadows. It was our pleasure helping you learn a little bit more about others, hopefully connect with some other people, and hopefully allow you to discover something new about yourself. Reviews help the Shadows build an online presence and help others learn about all the incredible things we're doing over here. So we would greatly appreciate our amazing listeners. Take a few minutes and leave us a review. You can leave us a review over at theshadowspodcast.com or any major podcast platforms. Thank you in advance for taking time to share your experience. We appreciate you over here at the Shadows Podcast.